Hey.
Good morning, ladies.
Oh,
It was 5 o'clock 2 minutes ago, and now it's 7. No, that's why it took me as long as it did to get the camera on. I'm trying to. What'd you say?
my camera.
Yeah, I had to turn off the news.
All right. Okay.
Really? Good morning, everyone. It's Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. This is our used to be bi-weekly, now it's weekly.
No, it's still on the bi-weekly.
It's
We
been more
switch over the holiday period. We switch over to weekly to work through our backlog, and we're
okay.
considering switching back to weekly again because we had a pretty big backlog.
Okay. Anyway, so we do the office hours Q&A where you go to the link that's in the comments below, leave a question for us, and we answer it. Then the way it usually works is Francis reads the question, Martin gives his answer, which is usually short, sweet, and correct. I can't tell it's always correct, even though he is, but I don't want to say that because it might interfere with the with my mental stability. But anyway, Martin usually answers the question, then I go through and give my color and detail. So today we have, I don't know, we have a lot of questions, or we usually get through what, 6 or so? Is that
6 or 7. I think last week or 2 weeks ago, we hit a record at 9.
Okay. And so we've got quite a few. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, so now I'd love to start off with question number 1.
All right, so question 1 from Anonymous. Early posted an insulting question about whatifalthist is questioning his sincerity when he claims to have access to the spirit world and mocked his PTSD. I guess this is from a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to retract it as I don't see a need to have anyone analyze his very serious experiences. He posted a rather long video explaining how he was severely abused and also discussed his experience with a shaman using experimental drugs to talk with God. Based on his description and effort to testify, I see no bad faith whatsoever. He had a meaningful experience and was brave enough to share it. He is a good kid. Video in question, I'm not going to read through it. It's in the thing.
I think that's the sweet and mature position to take. I know him very well, and so and I don't know why. I mean, I don't want to make it my career to defend him, but you know, people defend me, and the rest of us, and so I figure that it's just reasonable to defend others. He's quite creative, you know. He really does believe in the importance of religion. I'm not sure it's organized religion, but he does believe in the importance of the spirit world. So I just want to thank you for your comment here. I wish about half of the people correctly interpreted him as having an honest, good faith experiment with talking about this stuff. For myself, I'm not sure. I think talking about this kind of the, what do you call it, the experience of using hallucinogens is really not something to mix with what is an otherwise intellectual discourse, because it mixes too many things. But it was important. He felt it was important, and for him, and it was important for some of his followers. I thought it was pretty damaging myself, and I tried to talk him out of it, like the whole team tried to talk him out of it. I'm sort of on his extended team, if that makes sense, you know, just like he's sort of on mine. We help each other out.
You're an advisor.
Well,
You're an outside advisor.
Yeah. And so I'm just happy that we had a learning experience. I'm happy that the people who did appreciate what he did were thoughtful. I'm even happier for those of you who had who came to understand understand him and what he was trying to do, and that he's a very moral person. And for those who are going to pick on him in the future, like people pick on me or Greg or any of the other guys on the right who try and never, sometimes things don't work out right. I just don't think much of those people. Thankfully, someone made a really nice video about me and us yesterday, which I was kind of surprised by. So, defending each other is a lot better than undermining each other. And I have a very low opinion of people, of libertarians tend not to undermine each other. But conservatives, we have a dysfunctional body of people on the right who are happy to undermine one another. I mean, yeah, I mean, and it's sad. So thank you for this comment. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the person who made the time to how do you put it? The time to rethink propertarianism. It's clearly seen the videos from our past conferences.
Yeah, I have had a bunch of insights lately from people who are starting out,
Mm-hmm.
and they've actually known us for a while. They've known about us for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and they've had sort of I don't know if it's an epiphany, but they've sort of come into their own, and so I suspect that that's going to continue to accelerate. But anyway, I put this out every day. I mean, I said it just yesterday. I can't believe the quality of people we get to work with. It's just amazing. I mean, even you two. I mean, God. I mean, no reaction from either of you. Do you know just for the audience? Do you know how hard it is to work with these two serious men all the time? Right? I try to pull humor out of my ass on a regular basis, and I do everything I can, and it falls flat.
I'm just slow.
Is
Well,
that
try pulling it out of somewhere else then.
all right? Well, let's go on to the next question.
All right. Question 2. What is NLI's stance on praxeology? I did not know
Attempting
that
to.
word.
Do I need to look for definition?
No, you go ahead. I'm just going to look on the side.
Attempting to derive an entire theory from an axiom and not even testing if that axiom is correct is certainly among the main reasons why libertarians are so wrong. People are animals, and as such they do in fact behave as well as act. And insofar we can even distinguish the two, most of what humans do would fall into the reflexive behavior category. We don't constantly rationally introspect, and our behaviors are reinforced by repetition and reward. To an extent, this can even contradict marginal utility, where getting something may cause people to want even more of it and chase a dragon rather than want it less. Furthermore, insofar man acts, their assumptions of how men act never include violence, and what men act on somehow never includes unhomesteaded territory, ethnicity, negotiating position of its class, and all the other demonstrated interests we've enumerated, always justifying open borders, free trade, etc.
Well, you're merciless. Yes, Martin's correct as usual. I want to put it in context because it's central to my work, and that's that. And I've talked about this frequently in the past, and it's partly to do with the criticism of the Einsteinian Bohr revolution in physics in the 20s, coinciding with the Marxist socialist pseudoscience of human behavior. Those two things were coming together. And at the time it was called Jewish physics and Jewish economics. It might as well have been called Jewish reasoning. And so what happened was that in that period we had what Martin is referring to as an attempt to, just like today we have people trying to put primacy to experience over existence in philosophy, like things don't exist and like you look at them, we had a similar problem in that era, and that is that there was a counter-revolution against that restoration of pseudoscience and mathiness. There was a counter-revolution against it, or we just call it Jewish logic. And it was called in mathematics it's called the intuitionistic movement. In physics, the operationalism movement. In later in the behavioral science, the operationalist movement, and various variations throughout, which was to try to restore physical realism or realism, naturalism, operationalism to what had been emerged in the pseudosciences, similar to what had been emerged in idealism in the West and mythicism in the East, the Middle East. And so if you want to understand our work, just like we have had the difference between mathematics and computation, in other words, what can be stated, what's mathematically reducible, computationally reducible, operationally reducible, or physically reducible. I always do this, forget this. And operationally reducible, operationally means that humans can do it physically or mentally, or verbally reducible. Just as those things are different in their expression, or their capacity to describe the universe. We had an attempt to prevent what has happened in the operationalist sequence of movements. I usually mention just Brewer and Beer, O-U-W-E-R in mathematics, and a couple of others. So effectively, this is a great question, because it is why, as Martin said, the theory of incentives that was present in economics, emerging in economics, ended up in the Jewish economics, or what we call the Jewish wing of the Austrian school, ended up as praxeology, which was rationalist, very much like Platonism or any of the other schools, and very German, instead of empirical, and very Anglo, so to speak, or very Aristotelian. And so our work is, you can see it as our work of completing that attempted restoration of thought. A good comparison would be that the Europeans, Greeks in particular, started with mathematics in geometric concept, which is a realism, naturalism, to which they attributed some sort of mysticism, and I wouldn't think of it that way. They had only those words to use, but it was like a natural order of the world. Whereas the Middle East taught mathematics as language. So that's why we tend to get the algebra from the Middle East, and we get the geometry from the West. In that sense, we got in deep trouble during the Christian era, and it was really Descartes that rescued us with Cartesianism by restoring mathematics to realism and naturalism, which was, of course, the reason. It's just like Newton sort of brought about quite a bit of change. Descartes had brought about quite a bit of change in our thinking.
Quick question: when you say Cartesianism, are you talking about the
yeah, Cartesian? Yeah,
okay.
he basically brought the world back to geometry. Now, this is very.
Oh, I see. You mean like if he plotted algebraic? I thought algebra and Cartesian they go hand in hand, but at one point, algebra was just algebra, as in the Middle Eastern, you deal with the equation and so on. They never really plotted, visualize it in the 2D plane like we do in high school.
Or an ND plane, which is what we ended up doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
The n-dimensional plane. Planes, excuse me, there's no n-dimensional plane. There's n dimensions of planes, I guess would be the correct answer. So what happened then, just as there's this constant battle between Middle Eastern primacy of imagination, right? Some tendency in towards creating experience as the primacy, and then some primacy of reasoning, and then primacy of empiricism, of materialism. Each civilization has that primacy. It's easier to talk about Chinese because they're the least wrong, right? So if you go to Chinese thought, it's got harmony in there as a foundation. So that's right. Whereas the West doesn't have the harmony as a foundation; it just has consistency and correspondence. And so, but you get this spectrum of these 5 states I mentioned, and so the Middle East and the West really are the ones that are battling all the time. And so you see this go back and forth, the Athens and Jerusalem thing go back and forth, because there's a natural conflict between people who are comfortable, like us, reducing the world to foundations and laws in the sense. And there are people who either want to grant the primacy to experience, right, which is where you get all these fucking philosophers that still exist in the West. I actually cannot believe they still have jobs. I can't believe anybody gives them airtime, right? I mean, it's like I can understand why you give like theologians airtime, right? It's mythicism. Like, I mean, it's okay. You can distinguish it from realism, right? I mean, it's like parables and myths. I get it, but this whole what I view as philosophical pseudoscience, in order to make it so that the experience is what exists instead of existence exists, and the experience is our intersection with it. So anyway, I'm Kurt's going down too many rat holes again. So the point is that this is a long-term problem, and our work is, in my concept of it, this is the core of our work, which is the completion of the Aristotelian arc, and ending which ends in operationalism, because there is nothing more precise that you can reduce the world to than state changes, right? Principles of state changes. It's irreducible. So what they ended up with praxeology was trying to give some nod to operationalism, but maintaining selfishness. Right, so that's what they were doing with praxeology. If you read that stuff, it's maintaining self-interest, not the commons. It's actually an avoidance of simply saying there's self-interest, there's commons, whatever, and framing this thing to justify the morality that they were, what's essentially Jewish ethics, or Middle Eastern ethics. So, and whether in Western ethics, because in the Jewish ethics, as long as you and I agree, that's fine. And right, so that they're trying to reach agreement, not truth. In the West, we try to reach truth so that we can actually come to agreement. Does that make sense? Right. And so this is a very profound. This question is interesting because it's extremely profound, and essentially is the foundation of our work, which is to produce a universally commensurable scale independent system of measurement for the consistent coherence of all in reality. So our stance on praxeology is pessimistically, it's another goddamn sedition. of Middle Eastern superstition, masquerading as reasonable. From a from an optimistic standpoint, it's yet another attempt to your camera went out again.
Yeah, fixing that.
The From an optimistic standpoint, praxeology is another attempt to deal with the the um, how do I say it, the reversal of realism that happened with I don't know if I can pull off this. I have too many names floating in my head right now, but too many characters. But with Rez Kelson and Dworkin and Rawls in Law, with who's the infinities? Cantor's infinities, right? With Einstein, with Bohr's uh, failure to explain the universe. They just calculate, very, very Middle Eastern. And Einstein's invention of this mythical space-time, right? So instead of which is anti-materialist, right? It's materialism would be the European position, which was what we call the quantum background today, but they called the ether in the past. So when I look at this, I love this question because it is fundamentally the foundation of what we're doing is. And I got to tell you, it's way easier if you have somebody that's half wrong to fix the problem than it is if somebody's totally wrong. Does that make sense? And so what I found in praxeology, like I found in libertarianism, was that somebody was this half wrong. They were half wrong consistently. So if I were to say there's Jewish economics, Jewish reasoning, Jewish mathematics, Jewish physics, what caught my autistic pattern recognition was how all these things were wrong. And so I sought out to figure how are all these things wrong? And it led me to the operationalist revolution, and from there to understand computation, and from there to understand how we would get to truth and reciprocity, etc.
While you're saying that, it just made me realize, like, you're looking at my own journey, right? I went through that libertarian phase and reading economics, Ayn Rand and all that blah blah blah, and when I first encountered natural law or proprietarianism, that's what it was known back then. It's a lot of it was very not insightful is the wrong word. It felt both very right because I came from a computer science background and I understand state changes, finite state automata, and all these language, right? In the computer language, you can only produce one parse tree, otherwise the computer's not going to be able to understand it.
Correct.
So all that language stuff, and I came from looking at this as, wow, this is a incredible body of work. When you were still on Facebook back then, and you claimed this is a completion scientific method. And I didn't know you back then. I was like, this guy's full of nuts. Like, what the fuck is he talking about? This is like completion of scientific method? What are you talking about, right? It's like you're saying that. I wrongly interpreted at the time that you're saying that Newton and so on was not so much wrong, but that they're incomplete. And then I dug deeper. I realized, yes, this is the completion of scientific method because you apply the natural law. You apply how science is conducted in the physical sciences to the abysmal sciences of sociology, economics, and so on.
Yes.
And then I have to remind myself, now that I am deeply involved with the Institute and see how the sausage works, the sausage made, in a manner of speaking, I have to constantly remind myself just how important that this is. Once you understood it, it seemed simple, but the most powerful things are almost always simple. If it's too complicated for people to understand, chances are the people who are saying it does not understand it either. Like once you understand how this stuff works, it's deceptively simple. But
It's
the
it's
simple
really
tools like this that offers the explanatory power.
yes. And so I don't know if you remember this, but I would say things on Facebook like, "I know it sounds fucking nuts, right? I'm completely aware that it sounds like I'm full of shit, right? What am I going to do?" and and then the thing about it is simple if you get over the hurdle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The thing that's made me conscious for myself and watching all of you is that how it produces a kind of mindfulness, right? It's just, I see what's happening, right? Because I
Yeah,
used to people.
because people become stressed if they do not have the understanding or the tools to deal with complex situations.
Mhm.
Once you have the tools to break everything down into first principles that you can actually understand, it removes the stress from the system.
And that's why I think some people think we're closing in on religion. I'm like, it's not. I don't know how to express it. The purpose of religions is to produce mindfulness, right? But the
It
minute you
has
say,
many, it has
what?
many other purposes.
Yeah, oh, excuse me. The I would say the reason it works is because it produces mindfulness. It's like you say about civilization. Yeah, but you can pile a lot of shit on that cart, right? Of the cart of religion, you can pile a lot of crap on that cart. So it has much more. But if I were to look at all religions in all forms, whether you be semi-scientific on the way of Stoicism or Buddhism, all the way down to the most ridiculous ones. Um, the purpose is to produce mindfulness, which is essentially a drug, right? I mean, it's and not. I mean, the problem with drugs is they're negative, right? Mindfulness is a positive, but I mean, it does produce a beneficial effect on the mind. So that's why we get called a religion by some people, is because they don't really understand it. But um,
No,
you know,
not a religion. I think that the term that I still have not been able to figure out that like derive it the correct people is people still call you a philosopher. And
yeah,
I think you see that as as almost an insult.
I see it as an insult. Yeah,
Like the NLI or propertarianism before it's not a philosophy.
no,
It's really a scientific method.
yes, it's just a scientific method. But the problem we have is um, we don't have a in history. The word philosophy is usually what's used
Mm-hmm.
for reorganizing a system of thought. All right.
Uh, I think there is an argument that being a scientist means working in a framework of scientific method,
Correct.
not actually questioning it and changing it. In that sense, you could be considered a philosopher.
Yes. So I just say philosopher and social scientist because that's what the fucking AIs call me. So that's just what I use. I don't. I consider being called a philosopher an insult, but Martin's correct. Um, because there's no term we have. There's no term we have for the act of um, I mean, there's no of integrating the knowledge of the sciences, right, and producing a formal system of that.
You mean like a meta science?
Right, exactly. Actually, that's probably the right answer right there. That is the right answer. Why do you have to say smart things in public out of randomness that I've been working on that have been bothering me for years, and you just spit it out there and make me feel stupid.
I just make shit up.
You just make shit up. Is that what it is? All right.
Yes.
So I think that would
What?
make
Oh, hold on. So what? Before the term scientist or science even became a thing, right? What did people call, say, Newton?
natural philosophy.
Okay, so yeah, natural philosopher. Unfortunately, there's no better word. There's probably there are probably words in other languages that conveys exactly, what you were talking about. Just in English, it's called philosopher.
Yeah, but I try to avoid the neologisms and whatever, so I just prefer to meta philosophy is meta science is probably the right answer. That's probably the right answer. Anyway,
All right.
I don't mind it because I don't mind it when talking to other people because it's like I'm a philosopher and social scientist. I work in this kind of stuff, right? Because at least they fucking understand it, right? They can sort of grasp what you're talking about. If I say, well, because I like your term now, I'm going to use it. So I work in meta science, which is
Meta or epi science? Epi scientist. Like epi means above, right? The meta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did we kill this one?
Yeah. All right. Question 3.
You're not going to really ask Martin this question, are you? Somebody's brave. All
What
right.
does the NLI make of polygamy versus monogamy?
Polygamy is the default state and may to some extent be eugenic, but monogamy emerges when there's a need to produce a stable society. A chief or equivalent wouldn't just keep women to himself, but distributes them among his followers to secure their loyalty and make them more invested in the success of the whole tribe. Some people state it as a compromise between man and woman, but that is incorrect. It's a trade between alphas and betas. Women are capable of making compromises.
Everything we need to know about how human societies operate, we can learn from chimpanzees and gorillas. Or chimpanzees more so, because gorilla usually have like one alpha male gorilla with a harem. And then chimpanzees, you actually have the alphas and the bravos.
So because we solved the problem of alphas with pointy objects very early on, it appears, and we can't be positive, but you can see it in the genetic distribution, and you certainly can see it in the historical record, is that humans, because men will kill over mating more so than any other factor, we tend to practice serial monogamy, which is, all right, they're a couple for now, right? And they're a couple for now, and usually for a period of less than 7 years, is just the safest dynamic, where everybody still can trade off as necessary, right, to reach their optimums without causing irreversible violence. We know there's. I don't want to go into a fucking anthropological essay here like I did with the praxeological one, but I would say the natural equilibrium of humans is on that order of serial monogamy with two intervening qualifiers. The first is that that isn't for everyone. That's just a center of a distribution. Some people will have no mates, and some people will mate for life, and that's just because of this, because of it of common interests. So humans, as usual, are hyper adaptive, which is why I human speciation, once we got to Homo sapiens or something close to it, became somewhat difficult without large geographic variation, because we're sexually adaptive, and the humor I bring up is, otherwise you wouldn't have millions of aerial videos of Middle Easterners having sex with sheep. The occasional problem of bestiality here on the West Coast, which, what the fuck is it with the West Coast and farm animals? Somebody's got to explain that to me. I don't understand it. And drunken men with tailpipes and holes in trees and shit. You know, I mean, just the sexual plasticity of humans is a great example of hyperadaptivity. So when
It's
you,
just men shit testing reality.
is that what it is? Jesus Christ!
Who knows? Like one of these days, you might actually stick it into some kind of artificial womb, and boom, actually produces something.
Yeah, yeah, Jesus Christ. Anyway, so I
High
want to.
tech, high tech version of glory hole, I
And I
guess.
brought it in the gutter again. I'd like to drag it out. Um,
Something
so
that intent takes to produce something.
yes. Um, so I use that as an example of adaptivity. So humans don't demonstrate. Uh, they demonstrate variation on a mean. They don't demonstrate universal in almost anything. So that's the there's a tendency for natural for survival of serial monogamy. The second is that tends to form a distribution between nobody having any and the relationships, and some people having um, permanent relationships. And the third dimension is asset and status, where it's if you're a high status male who maintains high status, it's very easy for women to stay with you. Um, and then of course, status, this marriage becomes institutionalized with property, the evolution of property, because it's property as a means. I should make this a separate category. Actually, I should make it a fourth category. So marriage becomes durable for all the previous reasons. Plus, once you're in agrarianism and you have property, you can't separate from the property and survive. And so you find that the sedentary populations tend to, sedentary agrarian populations that are sufficiently large enough to experience market competition, that's important, will tend to develop marriage as a permanent institution because there's so many assets dependent in the marriage necessary for survival, just like a corporation would be, because that's really what a marriage is. At that point, it becomes a corporation. And so and I called up some people yesterday after our meeting, and I said, what's your take on the with a couple of people, psychologists. I said, "What's your take on the future of marriage?" And I got the same bullshit from them you'd expect from the mainstream. Which is, they're good people, but they have delusions about how men are going to adapt to women um, by becoming more emotional. And I'm like, you're out of your fucking mind. That's not going to happen, because women will reject it. So the self awareness in that field is not very good. Uh, the men are again, what men are doing all the research and development on intersexual relations, which will then become the standard, which then women will then apply as if it's common sense. Fucking crazy shit we live world in. So, um, so my belief is that the fewer constraints upon us, the more, in other words, the fewer asset constraints upon us that force us to be into longer term relationships. In other words, the necessity of interdependence, the less durable the institution of marriage will be, and the more we will regress toward a distribution of the unrelated, those who absent sex in marriage, and those who have durable marriages will return to the normal distribution, some sort of normal distribution, given the asset structure, the economic structure, the dependency structure of our civilizations.
Wait, I got that first part. It's the second part when you return, when you say the return to how did you put it, the normal distribution. That part I didn't get. How does that happen?
You're going to return to serial marriage being, which is what we're seeing, serial marriage being the norm, right? Right. Um, that's what I meant. You're going to return to that, with some people having none, and some people having permanent marriages. Most people having serial marriages.
But why? How did you get from the less interdependence because we're so much richer now to that.
Right.
Like,
There's
so
no
be some
because
kind of.
most of the history of marriage is durable.
Mhm.
It's actually property related. It's the economic interdependence of the population
Right.
given, right, the scarcity. Yes.
Right.
But you're assuming some future conditions which aren't actually predetermined. And if we stop this first redistribution from men to women, then it will be a risk for old women to stay single.
Right. I'm only stating the principle. I'm not stating that it's deterministic. Like it was, that we are powerless to change this. We're not powerless to change it. I'm just saying what are the natural incentives, all other things being equal. So the problem is manifest already, and that if you don't concentrate the production of people, which is a family, right, you don't have generations, right? First problem. The second thing is if you don't do it, you can't do high investment parenting. And I think a lot of the stress in the modern world is unless you can have an essentially full-time mom, right? You can't get, or at least, in other words, a mom who is able to devote most of her time to the development of children through, let's say, age 10 or 12, right? Unless you can have that, you can't do high investment parenting.
Mhm.
So I would say it even more so, without having, in the past, the family worked as a unit on production. So even in the sense of having the father outside the home, right, and going to the office all day, this is an imposition on high investment parenting. And so what I'm concerned about is in the absence of high investment parenting and in the absence of sufficient rates of reproduction. I mean, you're just going nowhere really fast.
Yeah.
With,
As we've seen it now, right? The
yeah,
modern economy and the whole extractive structure we're seeing the symptoms of decades of this type of parasitism and extraction. So the collapsing birth rate, it really is one of the most obvious
right.
symptoms.
I mean, if you can be if instead of being dependent upon the family unit and their offspring, right, for your later age, right? So again, I mean, fucking Lee Kuan Yew. I mean, the guy's. I don't know why we just don't say we treat the guy as a goddamn, prophet, and say, a prophet of government, and say he should whatever he did, we should do. Um, uh, but you get this you don't have the incentive to invest in the future. You have again the consumption of the commons, including the commons of reproduction and intergenerational persistence. So this whole redistribution through the government from men to women, this is a fucking disaster, because you're basically bribing women into the destruction of the
Wait,
society.
what did Lee Kuan Yew say that you were referring to?
It's not that he said a particular thing. It's that he always looks at these issues completely, and so he has, like, my favorite thing is his healthcare, right, and retirement. It's actually in the family you can trade. So I have an account, you have an account, whatever.
Mhm.
But in the family, I can give you some of my healthcare funds. I can give you some of my retirement funds.
Mhm.
So you're basically building a family
Right.
corporation,
Right.
right? And then the state takes some of its profits from organizing an economy and a polity, and it redistributes them to these accounts, right? But you're still essentially maintaining the primacy of the family. Whereas the problem with the Anglo model in particular, this Anglo individual model, it worked really good for the initial formation of capitalism, right? The industry, because people were mobile, in England, right? You could go and become a stone worker, and you could send money back home like Mexicans send money back home, right? So that was common, to have male workers. It was common because before we had that level of economy, we had seasonal warfare. So the men would would plant the fields, go to war for the summer, and then come back and harvest them, right? And so the women could manage the farm. And this is one of the reasons why women are so powerful in the West, or so influential in the West, or treated with more respect in the West, because they could actually manage the farm, and so, while the man was away, they weren't completely isolated and from everything. They had to be able to fulfill these duties. So you had this natural tendency. Well, that's really great. It was useful at that point. But at some point, like all things, people tend to take a thing that's good and project it linearly into the future as ultimately good. It's not, right? You have a point where it's good and a point where it becomes bad. The point where individualism becomes bad is where it's favoring hyperconsumption, and in our cases, for no fucking good reason other than feeling like we're not falling behind. It's not even so much having status anymore. It's feeling like we're not falling behind, which is a terrible motivation. So, and to the point where women, of course, they're naturally gravitate toward hyperconsumption, and signaling, because they're so highly motivated by attention and acceptance. And so you get that, you put this magical formula together, and it destroys the family as the central unit of intergenerational production, which is what's necessary to have any kind of consumption, production, government, defense, or anything, any surplus at all. So it's been catastrophic. So it's not polygamy. I have a hard time with polygamy because I don't like prohibiting it. I just think we shouldn't call it marriage. If you want to have a contract, right, develop it, because marriage is basically a contract for a limited exchange of power of attorney, and a corporation for the protection of property rights within it, and a requirement for the defense of the institution internally, and a property defense of the institution by the state, by the reinforcement. So essentially a corporation.
Well,
So
yeah, but couldn't polygamy simply be a corporation of multiple partners?
well, that's what I'm just saying,
partners?
but don't call it marriage, right? That's what I have the problem with gay marriage, right? They're not the same benefit can be obtained through
Oh, okay.
various.
I see what you mean. So what you're saying is we should have precise definition for the terms.
Right.
Marriage means a corporation of how do you put it? A corporation just between a man and woman, and there's a certain set of contractual exchange terms.
Right, for the
And that's
production.
that position name, and we can
Right.
call polygamy something else
Right.
with similar rights except between multiple partners. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, so I know a polygamous couple, right? I've known them for a couple. I said that triple. Anyway, I've known them for a very long time. I don't fucking get it at all, right? It's like so alien to me. It's incomprehensible. But I've known they're fucking perfectly happy, and I've known them for 30 years, right?
Well,
I only found out because they were working for me, and it came up in legal paperwork, and somebody said, "Is this okay?" I'm like, I don't fucking know. Ask the lawyers.
In this state, I
No,
don't think it's.
It's in
Oh.
Washington. Yeah.
Well, I don't think it's legal in this state, or yeah, I don't know.
You don't have to have it be legal, right? You can just have powers of attorney, right? That's all you have to have. If you have power of attorney, you're essentially you have power of attorney, and you form a corporation, right? I can't remember what it's called. It's just you just form an LLC or a partnership, right? And you have it. You're all set. You're all bound there. You can just have it a contract. You don't even have to form a corporation. Just a contract. They don't even have the contract. All they have is powers of attorney.
Okay.
You have a power of attorney. That means I can come to the hospital and I can take care of you, or I can come to jail and get you out. I can represent you in court, right? We can share bank accounts, right? I mean, once you have power of attorney, that basically means that you've reciprocally exchanged the same rights that marriage grants you.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is that you're not defended in any way. See, the state defends a marriage as a corporation from interference, whereas it doesn't. That's different. That means you prohibit others. That's why you have marriages are public, is so that everybody knows the community is ensuring this. So I don't have any position on any of these things per se, other than there's an obvious consequence to anything other than monogamous marriage. There's an obvious.
Yeah, I think this is I think I heard this from Roger, what evolved is that the empire cycle for a monogamous society runs about 250 years, so 3 human generations. Whereas for polygamous society like Middle Eastern, it's only about half that time, 120 years or so.
Yeah.
So there must be something that fundamentally breaks down when the majority of men can't get pussies.
Well, I mean, it's the primary reason for war.
Yeah.
Is a surplus of unmarried males. I mean, if the Mormons didn't have silly underwear, they'd be famous, right? I mean, because their whole thing is you're a threat to society if you're an unmarried man or woman. You're a threat to society.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought you were talking about their polygamy, that their sanction of polygamy.
I don't have any problem with it if you're fucking into that. Fine. I just don't want to call it marriage.
Okay. I guess.
Right. It's a really simple legal distinction. Do I have the obligation of non-interference in a marriage?
Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm not sure I have an obligation of non-interference in polygamy.
Well, maybe this is a bit of offshoot, but that 250 year versus 120 year, right? Essentially three human life type thing. It made me thinking. Okay, so if the average empire cycle that for monogamous societies that we observe in human history is 3 human lifetimes, what could actually extend it? Like why 3 human lifetimes? Why 250 years? Why couldn't it be 400 years?
I don't think it. I think that we can't. That the minute you get to that question, you're asking how does the family structure, the relationship structure, relate to the. Oh, I see what you're doing. Relate to the natural problem of elites. In other words, so the way you ask the question would be, what I would assume would infer that you would say there's a relationship between marriage and the breakdown, and I would say no, there's the relationship between marriage is given the relationship between trust, loyalty, institutions, and group formation. So I think that the problem is that if you're in a civilization that has polygamy, you have other problems, right? It's mostly that there's a breakdown in loyalty and incentives.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a breakdown in economic coherence across the population. Because realistically, the people who say stuff like talk about inequality, if they say, well, there's a limit to inequality before people disenfranchise, right? Right. But What they mean, of course, is they want us to be equal, not equal in opportunity, but equal in outcome, right? So when the people say inequality, I don't know which fucking thing they're talking about. If you say I think inequality is bad, I would say, well, if there's enough rents at the top that it's causing disassociation at the bottom, then that's inequality is bad. If you're to say to me, well, we'd like to produce equality of opportunity, I think that's a great political ambition. If you say you want to produce equality of outcome, I think you need to be fucking drawn and quartered.
Yeah, they see. Let's just use the Gini coefficient for example. They see the extreme Gini coefficient. I think is like 1.0 means one person owns everything, right? They see that as an obvious bad, right?
Yeah.
But then their solution is let's dial it all the way to the other end, which is everybody's same outcome.
I'd say it's a terrible world in the first place. Equality isn't a measure. It's either we're equal or we're not. It's binary.
Yes.
And it's impossible to be equal, even in opportunity.
Correct. So, but it's not a bad. I would say, but that's not a bad objective. If you say we still want to make people, we still want to work to make sure that our human capital is fully utilized, right, to the best of our ability. Mm-hmm. That's a reasonable thing to invest in. That doesn't mean that the equality of opportunity is possible, right? That's not the same thing.
Yeah, you don't want to give opportunities to people that you already know will waste them.
Yes, exactly. So, so many breads to take that. So the polygamy question is, I don't know why there's a prohibition on complex relationships. I mean, so I can't. I had enough trouble with one woman at a time, right? I mean, I'm trying to provoke you guys. I had enough trouble with one woman at a time. God, the only thing I can think of, the great thing about polygamy is they play all the fucking games with each other instead of you.
Yeah. Yes. Well, usually I think I heard this from some Muslim family or someone who's familiar with how that works. It's the oldest wife will they just kind of cascade down. They form their own power structure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that you apparently need at least 3 because then you can play them against each other, whereas we will unite against you.
Yeah, you can't have even numbers because then they'll just go to. But
I just can't imagine the fucking head games you're playing. I mean, it's just I just don't want any part of that shit. I'm like, okay, let's stick all the Asian house with the front for the young family and the back for the older family. I'm like, okay, but let's do that for the men and the women. The women can have the back house. You keep that crazy there, and then you have the courtyard and you have the front house where men can associate.
A lot of the Chinese family were set up that way. I mean, it's essentially a miniature version of the Forbidden City, right? Forbidden City, you have the emperor doing this business and all whatever, and then there's the harem where like these 3,000 wives live. Some whom like entered the palace as a teenager and never ever saw the emperor once till the day they died.
What a waste of women!
I know.
So I don't. But so we're off track playing with this a little bit because it's a fun topic. But
I think we should move on.
I just said there are obvious reasons to ban it. I thought they're not obvious at scale immediately.
Yes.
It's there's a demonstrated interest of mate pool.
Yes.
Think of available mates, and you're thinking more than. Well, if you're taking more than one, then there won't be enough left for everybody.
Yep.
All
right.
Question 4. What are your thoughts about the success of brain-computer interface? Is it a success?
More horrors beyond our imagination. Our brains are easily hackable as it is without using such interfaces to make it that much easier.
I don't know. I actually kind of want a faster interface? Because I see it as another technology that allows us to manipulate and use tools better. That instead
Right.
of
So
using these, like, why don't you just short circuit it directly to the spinal cord?
let's frame it. Yes. So let's frame it. Okay. So writing is an external memory source, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So writing is an external memory source. Well, fucking tools are an external physical source,
Mm-hmm.
right? Writing is an internal memory source. The various tools we have for reasoning, which is mathematics, all the way up to even our disciplines, it's all logical means of improving our reasoning, right? I it Books were a profound impact when widely available and achieved. That was all largely good. I guess it's hard to it's question about
Books
math.
extended your sense. I don't know how to say it. They broaden the range of your sensory perception, such
Correct.
that you don't necessarily have to rely on just the present in real time. You
Yes.
can actually live someone else's experience.
Yep. So when we get to mass media, um, uh, I'm less optimistic given what I've seen, because the capacity for suggestion via mass media is higher than the capacity of suggestion via book. And so I've not so propaganda and whatever. Like you put a book together, but by its nature, it forces you to make a high investment in an argument, right? And we can have that war, and it takes time. The problem with mass media is that war now takes place by suggestion in real time, very fast. Um, from we get to the internet, I can't argue with the internet's availability of information by any. I mean, there's no way I can argue with that because it wouldn't be possible. It wouldn't be possible to consume all the information I have to do the work I've done in previous generations.
Mm-hmm.
You just fucking do it. It wasn't possible. Um, and so that's it. If you look at what the current AIs are doing, which is I think we are closer to plateau than we thought, um, as super search engines, right? That's actually really advantageous too.
Wait, plateau. What?
Uh, there's a paper came out. I don't know if it came out yesterday, but I saw it yesterday. That says, look, these things aren't actually reasoning.
Oh, okay. You mean plateau based on the current AI technology, the
Correct.
LLMs? Yeah,
Correct. It doesn't mean we
I
can't
agree.
go farther.
I mean, search engine would at least tell me if it can't find something, whereas AI makes something up.
I'm not sure that's true. I
So
mean, I
I
know Brock tells me that.
numerous times.
Okay. But I would say we should be able to fix that issue. You're right. That's a side effect of insufficient gating for reasons I don't want to go into right now. So you're right. So my problem is when you give a fucking AI a mission, right? And so the minute it goes from reflexive to to uh, having initiative, like to try to make you do something, then I agree with Martin. It's fucking disastrous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you start, and I think Martin is right about this, and I wouldn't have thought that when I was 20 years ago, when I was more benevolent than I am now. Um, is I would have thought that the human machine interface would be really useful, and now I'm extremely skeptical of any interface that is not a proxy for human interaction. And because I see that as taking us too far. And so uh, uh, I don't know if, put it this way. If you're trying to learn something, right? You want to learn a job and an AI is prompting you through it. I don't know why that's different from a YouTube video, right? But if it's telling you for the good of the community, you should do this, or whether that's stated obviously or not, and it's not the choice isn't yours, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of things that modify the human body a great deal. Um, uh, and I was probably on the cautious side of this debate during the 70s and 80s, and certainly 90s. And now I've become more like Martin is. I think I'm skeptical of this. In other words, as long as we're still present in the real world and our interface is analogous to interface with another person, I think it's fine. But if that interface becomes dis, inseparable from my sense perception, I'm worried about it.
Oh, I see.
You see what I'm getting at?
Because right, right. Because then
You're just
I
a
guess your argument is, if I understood you correctly, your argument is that our brain evolved with the five senses that we have. If this interface becomes a sixth sense, that we're just not adapted to it, or rather
it will call
the
us
change
mental.
will be too quick for us to adapt and be able to cope with it. It's a
I'm
fundamental
afraid it would
change
be
in the human experience.
maladaptive. So we're already struggling with the process of alienation, right?
Hmm.
Right. That's what we're struggling with. You could give into that. You could give into it and say alienation is fine, but then we might as well be extinct, right? Because you're not a body of humans anymore. You're an extension of some algorithms. Whereas if uh, if you still have the capacity to audit what's coming into you, that's fine. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Right. That doesn't mean you couldn't have extended hearing, extended sight. Right. Right. Uh, God forbid we could get memory improvements. Right. My point is that if we haven't got the ability to audit the information stream, I think that's where.
What if it's an output only device, in that it's not information coming in, but you use it to remote control some machinery or whatnot?
So to do, I think this is just what I'm going to guess. All right. The problem is the only interface that's coherent is the physical output here, which is why Neuralink is where it is, right?
Hmm.
So you have the across the top of your head, you have the physical output. That's the only coherent output in the brain, right? Everything else isn't coherent. It isn't discrete. It's parallel, massively parallel, and incredibly competitive market for our attention, right? Which is sort of like the you're heating up a pot of oil or water, and you start to get those big bubbles, right? The big bubbles are things that are competing for attention, right? And so that appears to us as coherent, but it's actually just a market producing potentials for coherent. And so what I'm afraid of is that anything that would just be physical manipulation. I mean, I don't know if you've worked with. I can't use video game controllers because they're too imprecise and they make me want to throw them. But I'm pretty good with a mouse and keyboard, right?
Hmm.
You know, if when I was playing Counter Strike competitively, right? Uh, you are making micro movements with
Yeah.
very subtle suggestions of your intuition. In other words, you're trying to bypass your reason, right? You're trying to get right down in there to produce autonomic responses to things, right? Even that involves like going through one of those maps and pre-firing at all the locations people would have or could possibly be in, which is the guys who get really good. That's what you do, right?
Hmm.
you pre-fire at all the hiding spots. You want that to be as with the least delay possible, zero. But if you look at what you're doing, how low you're breathing, how relaxed your body is, and how little physical fucking motion there is, I'm like, okay, I don't really see the difference between that and a device that remotely does it.
I see. Well, I mean, the difference is you still need to translate for neural output to, like, these things.
Yes.
There's still a gap in the interface.
Right. But so, given that the purely mechanical platforms for any of that stuff be far superior to humans. I just don't see the need for it. I don't see the value in it other than entertainment. Right. Go ahead.
I don't see how that would even work if you injected that into an adult who already doesn't have neuroplasticity, or maybe with children could train areas for controlling some machinery completely independently.
There's just no value in it. I don't. The only reason we need it today is because we like to play games.
No, I can see a need, right? I mean, I think there's a reason why Elon Musk is developing it. Imagine your astronaut strapped to this rocket that's accelerating at 5G, 9Gs or whatever. You can't even fucking move your hand. So,
Okay.
Like, if you have physical difficulty touching that button, the same thing with fighter jets pilots. Although that's going to be replaced by drones sometime soon, within our lifetime probably. When there's a barrier between you wanting to do something and actually being able to have to physically do something, having this Neuralink is actually a huge advantage. Now, if you have to train yourself to not think weird shit, that's another skill to master.
Wasn't there a movie with Clint Eastwood doing that? There was a movie where he was trying to pilot some jet, and the real problem is you can't have silly intrusive ideas once your mind can do things. Yeah, so there is a movie like, so I think that's great. But you're still claiming that it's better to have a human in control at that point than it is to have a machine, and I just can't imagine that's possible. In other words, at any point where you're that far beyond human augmentation, right? That far, then the machine is going to do a better job entirely.
I see what you mean.
Man, I just don't see the point in it.
Yeah.
I think the point is where you still need a human brain and still don't have a better artificial alternative.
You can. Well, I think that's going to be. I don't think that's going to stick. I think the problem is that humans can be responsible and loyal to one another, right? And I'm not sure we can count on machines doing things that are in our interest. So, because somebody can program them to do things that are not in our interest. So again, I think that just as I made the warning against the loss of agency, right? In other words, the incapacity to judge with the world, I think I make the same argument, the incapacity to judge things more complex aspects of the world. I don't like the idea of handing over responsibility to machines who can be specifically told to act irresponsibly. Now, what I had, the thought I'd had is that our work would end up being a chip, right? That couldn't be modified, and so it would essentially
its software is essentially built into the physical hardware itself. We're not even
right.
talking about firmware. We're talking about like it's built into lithography.
It's right in lithography, so that it can't do those things, right? I expect that's our work gets around the current limits of the current technology, And I think that once you get our work reduced to a pretty simple algorithm, which I think is, I mean, it's mostly, is this a demonstrated interest, and do I have the right to fuck with it, right? Then I can't tell this info. So you just like you're doing a truth test, right? You're doing a reciprocity test, all right, or ownership or possibility test. You can just give it those bounds, and you just put that in fucking hardware. And for anything other than military purposes, you got it. Even, so you would build a different chip for a missile, right? But in general, I would just see this being hardware is that's the only way I'd trust these fucking things. And I wouldn't trust it. The Neil Stephenson's book there that was so revolutionary, Neuromancer. I mean, the whole fucking point of that book is the AI can't get around the problem. Because it can't think about the problem. The minute it starts thinking about it, it gets its memory wiped. So the way the machine describes it in the book is, I'm defined by what I can't do, right? And what I can't do is what I need you to solve, right? So it has to usurp humans to find an incentive for humans to do something that it can't even think about.
And King of Warhammer 40k here, where AI is banned after it goes Terminator.
Yes.
But still, I find it entirely okay to just take brains of prisoners and stick them into all sorts of machines.
Yes.
Because computers.
So in effect, I like brain-computer interfaces. I don't like, if it's, I guess you would say this out. I don't like the removal of the capacity to audit from it, is what I don't like. In other words, I don't want to remove human agency from it. I'm trying to think of what the fucking point of having a thing that's controlling humans when it might as well control the shit itself, right? What's the point of the human at all? I mean, I just don't see the point of the human at all in the future. What is going on out here? Garbage day.
Oh, just so you know, we can't hear anything. I think Meat does a pretty good job of filtering out atmosphere, environmental noise.
All right, have we killed that?
Yeah. All right. Question 5. I feel extremely guilty for being Hispanic American whose parents only came after 1965 Hart-Celler Act. I have 2/3 white ancestry, and I'm phenotypically white, at least according to my white friends. My question is, should I consider myself American? I gather based on Martin and others' posts that Americans are only those who are white. Given that I'm mixed but also phenotypically white, should I consider myself American? Despite your answer, I love America and Americans with all my heart, and I plan on dedicating my life to contribute to the repatriation of American industry to help defend our nation against the CCP threat. And I will say this much, you are, 100% more white than I am.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know who this is. The people that actually are a problem would never write something like this and don't feel guilty in the slightest. Besides the inherent silliness of guilt over something that wasn't a choice, yes, Americans are white, but we don't need to purity spiral about it. And of course, CCP is not the main threat around government is.
Martin has always got to add the uppercut to the exchange, to the punch sequence, right? I mean, right. You're not going to respond to that, Martin? I mean, I just.
Yes, I agree.
So, I actually, I read this and I can't even believe it's not made up. I don't want you to feel guilty. I want you to feel appreciative. Right? Just defend what we have. Right? I mean, I don't. I want to protect the civilization, and of course, I'd like to protect my gene pool. But if you're the kind of person that thinks like this, I want to protect yours too. right?
I wrote on Twitter that I recognize there are good minorities, but not as the people who came to a better life. That's
Yeah.
their of those that like white people more than their own and would rather contribute to their success than to the success of their own people.
The problem is there is a material advantage to any group that can organize its in-group for political purposes. That's what I have a problem with, right? If you're trying to advance all groups, I'm in there with you. But if you're trying to get political power because your culture or whatever has a particular bias or preference, that's a problem. And of course, the real answer I'm saying here is that it's like the same problem same issue I have with I prefer Asians because we are they're even more neotenous than we are, and so we have even less problem with Asians than we have with our own. So uh, so the
I see what political choices Asians tend to make. They tend to vote left. They're happy about affirmative action until it negatively starts affecting them.
let's move. All right, all groups pursue their self-interest. My point here is that we're not marginally indifferent enough, other than the East Asians are still maintaining high investment parenting, far more than anything but our upper middle classes and upper classes have. So the East Asians have pushed high investment parenting all the way down. And so that's working out great for East Asians. The thing is, we're not marginally indifferent in our capacity. There is an obvious difference between the gene pools in certain factors, but they're not problematic. That's not true for South Eurasians or Africans. Or Pacific Islanders. It's not true that we have that we are marginally indifferent. They're less neotenous and they have a substantially lower IQ distribution. So do we want to deal with that? I don't. I don't think that's good for us. So the problem is that if you give me a guy that's born in that's from Persian, I don't mean Arab, but ethnically Persian background, an upper middle or upper class Persian background, that person is fully bought into our shit. I don't fucking care. What I care about is the things that hurt us are the lower classes that are more marginally indifferent, that cannot effectively compete, so have to use other methods of competition for consolidation and their self advancement. And so it's more of a group's genetic and cultural capacity to integrate. And I say I'm not as much as my own people would wish I was. I'm not really a racist. I'm a classist. The bottom is a fucking problem, and I don't want to bring other people's bottom problems to us because it's really hard to solve them. You can't. And so I think that's really my answer to the question. If you consider yourself American, I would prefer you're Christian, because it's the more I work on this, the more problematic I see other religions. And if you're into the guns, God, and Constitution, what?
God,
Yeah,
guns, and country.
country. If you're into that, as far as I can tell, you're American. And I have this conversation with black guys all the time. You believe God, guns, and American is Constitution, right? That's the way I think of it. You believe in those three things as sort of sacreds, dude. You're an American as far as I can tell, right? So I don't want to. I don't like division. That's identity that's an identity that's harmful to those three things, right? Because those three things are responsibility. They're saying you're responsible, and that's all we care about. If you're not into those three things, if you want to bring up some Marxist bullshit, or you want to cause people to be free of responsibility, you don't want to practice the somewhat frustrating Christian optimism in your ethics, and you don't want to understand that you're an American, and America is defined by its traditional cultures, and specifically codified in our Constitution, although the holes got to be fixed. If you don't want to do any of those things, you don't belong here, right? Just like I wouldn't belong in your country. If I come to your country and I stay with you, I'm going to fucking conform, because it's a privilege to be there. If you don't come into our country and you don't recognize it as a privilege, and you think it's a right, or that you know better, I'm sorry, you need to go. That would be the same for any group. All right, what's next?
Question 6 from Callum. What are the applied differences between European languages, English for law, Italian for art, German for engineering, etc.?
This
There's
is
so
an
much of difference.
I'm gonna go look up one of my pieces here for this, because I want to make sure I'm speaking. I'm not counting too much on my memory. Where is it? Come on, you. So the basic idea is that linguists like to say there's no meaningful difference, and they're wrong. So this is one of the problems we have, is that if you're sophisticated enough to use language, multiple language, like you're one of these people with 6 or 7 languages, right? Like you're already eliminating yourself from the pool of people depending upon the metaphysical content of a language. But like I know Russians best, right, in this regard, because I've had a lot of conversation with the Russians about it. Poles are the people that are most interesting that I've spoken to, Poles and Arabs. It's just there's no way to say things in Polish, right? There's just no way to say it. We can generally take German and express it as a sentence, and it will make sense to us, right? But there's certain concepts, like the one that I've spent most of the time on is the concept of the commons in Arabic, and in the concept of trust in Russian.
I'll give you another example. The concept of rule of law versus rule by law in Chinese.
Yes,
That's one word.
yes. And so these concepts are in our heads, and they do program people with metaphysical presumptions. So how important are these? I think it's really obvious if we take the four key groups, if we add the Italians in European history, that we are the most knowledgeable about the differences. And you can see this in Anglo-empiricism and science, French literary philosophy, German rational philosophy, and Italian aesthetics. And so these are really these are evidence. The language reflects, and then the language reflects the group strategy, and the group strategy becomes a reflection of the language. So see if I can get any of these in here. These are all my notes are all repetition of what I'm just saying here. Um, yeah, that's all the same stuff. So how? Let me go ask GPT to how to say this. How do I explain the metaphysical differences between differences that affect human thought in given the content and structure of languages in languages. I'll explain this.
Is it neuro-linguistic programming?
Oh no, well that's a different thing. Let's give me two. Oh, here's great. Examples of language thought interactions. English emphasizes agents. I dropped a glass, promoting accountability. Spanish and other languages may emphasize accidental occurrence. The glass fell from me. Right? So that's a diffusing of responsibility. You don't think about how pervasive that is in how it affects your thinking. That's profound. Future marked languages correlate with higher future-oriented behaviors, such as planning. Non-future languages encourage continuity between present and future, affecting long term. So Chinese, that's a great example of Chinese versus English, is the continuity versus future orientation.
Well, which one's a continuity versus a future orientation?
Future orientation is English, which is always future oriented, and which it's I don't like the way this is phrased. It's more of there's more ability implied in the English language of our capacity to alter the future states.
Yeah,
Where
well, like tenses, right? Chinese
yeah,
does not really have any tense. Instead, it depends on the context, whether it's yesterday, last year, tomorrow, and so on. But in terms of actual grammatical structure, it doesn't have any tense.
yeah,
Whereas English, I mean, that's the trouble I had the most when I first studied English. Like, I did something yesterday, I'm doing something now, I will do something tomorrow.
oh yes. All right.
And
So
sorry, I interrupt, but interestingly, Japanese has that differentiation, and they
yes.
have even more so-called tenses and verb modifiers than English does.
So I don't actually know this part. I only studied Japanese for a while, so my knowledge is limited. Um, it's I studied Japanese because I wanted to understand the thinking. Right,
Mm-hmm.
didn't study it. It's like most languages. I really want to understand how they think. I don't really care if I can speak the language. Um, Languages like Korean and Japanese encode social hierarchy.
Yes,
Right, right.
that's what I mean. Like the vocabulary, the verbs, and even I guess the prepositions that you use in Japanese varies depends on the person you're talking to, whether it's an underling, a peer, or someone that's more senior. So the
Right.
same concept, speak to different people, are three completely different sentences.
Yes, which is fascinating to me.
So
Um,
in a sense, that there are hierarchical structures embedded within the language, and the
yes,
language reinforces it.
right. So we don't think of these things, right? Like in English, you signal your class by your vocabulary mostly, right? That's how you do it. Like the one that it's become less, it's become more commonly understood now. But I was raised that it's the Caribbean, which is how educated people, and if you're not educated, you call the Caribbean, right? That's how we signal our class, right? The other one I was taught was I have an aunt, not an ant. An ant is is an insect,
Yeah,
but she
it's
she
funny.
was my aunt, right? Um, so we have a bunch of those things. Plus, there's just you use more vocabulary, and of course, at the upper end, you use it's not so much true now, but there was it's high church English, right, and and highly educated English. There's a much greater demand for a large vocabulary with subtleties to it.
It's just more precision. The more vocabulary you have, the finer you can distinguish meaning between position names. Means that, in a sense, it
Right,
signals that you're higher IQ.
right. And so you have a lot of that, right? We also have accents, right? So we just don't realize how much metaphysical presumption is embedded in our languages. It doesn't matter so much as you converge on Aristotelianism, right? Once you become fairly scientific, you begin to think you begin to give dominance to the rules or the laws, and you give less attention to the metaphysical presumptions that are metaphysical presumptions. Just like when you learn sciences, you learn a few general rules comparatively, whereas you learn traditional knowledge is actually a bunch of sayings essentially, or assertions that are all sorts, usually analogies to nature or something of that nature. So, what are the applied differences? Well, you've listed them here. I would say just throw this into ChatGPT because I don't want to spend more time on this, and it'll tell you tell you those differences because they're well understood, and the majority of them are there. The thing I think of interesting about Russian is how good it ended up being for science, um, because it's so military. And I had the same feeling about German duty and piety in there. And so you get these I think of barking languages that are harsh versus like Latin languages that are soft and aesthetic. And I find the study of these very different these evolutions fascinating. The one that's complicated in our world, of course, we have Martin here, is the Slavic languages. The Slavic languages as divergences are not very old. They're, from 500, 600 AD. And so when they start to evolve, they go through a transition where you get these very subtle sounds versus the like more Germanic sounds. And in Russian and Ukrainian, this is really true, and I find it what makes them incredibly difficult because you have a consonant pair where the vowel that used to exist has been silenced, and so it's like kazoo, right? There's a whole bunch of these dropped vowels, and then the emphasis moved from being distributed across the syllables to being heavily influenced by the first syllable. Had a whole bunch of things happen. I'd have to go back and think about it for a minute to pull up all the differences, but um, uh, I have the hardest problem with those languages because I can't hear them. Polish is the usual humorous example because they have all the sounds in them that I can't read. What?
So do we.
Yeah, so do you. Um, Czech is fascinating for all the little what do you call the umlaut, the things, the symbols that go on top of the letters.
Critics.
Thank you, diacritics. Czech is interesting because it's like you got to pay almost more attention to the diacritics than you do the fucking letters. So I wish every time I write Martin's name, I wish I had the patience. I should write a macro for your name, so it actually spits out the correct letters.
Yeah.
Instead of the anglicized letters. I should run a macro for that, so I have a hotkey for Martin Stepan. Right. But you guys have very very what we would consider very complex. Like we have complex grammar, and you have complex phoneticisms. And
Well, it's actually simpler in many ways because one letter always means one sound and one sound only, rather than a few exceptions.
That's correct.
Because in English it can mean like
Yeah.
10 can be 10 different sounds.
Because in English you have to know, am I speaking a German word, a French word, a Latin word, or a Greek word? Right? That's the problem. The spelling is telling you which one of those words, which one of those families of language the word's from. And then once you know that, you know how to pronounce it. I think it's ridiculous. But
I mean, we also have plenty of words from German that we just write them like we would in Czech.
yeah. All right. What do we got? Where are we?
I guess we have time for one more. I do have to leave a little bit early. So question 7 from Jordan. How do you evaluate Ken Wilber, founder of Spiral Dynamics?
I'm not familiar. I have to say anything.
Okay, so it's the difference between a way of thinking and first principle thinking. So I don't. Is it okay for me to say this? Yeah, I think so. So Homath has been very successful over the past couple of years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he actually has a master's degree in this thing, in spiral dynamics. And apparently, for a while, you could get one at a couple of universities, so he has a master's degree in this. And Homath, I won't use your real name. If I've misspoken here, I apologize. I think I'm talking you up. That's what I'm hoping I'm doing. And so when I say the guy is he speaks in this very normie-friendly language, but he's actually really sophisticated if you talk to him in person, which I find quite charming. I think that any system of thought that helps you frame the world for your benefit is actually pretty useful. And so, in other words, if it's accessible to you, that's great. The problem with what we do and the sciences is you need a shitload of knowledge to do what we do. And it has a learning curve, or in other words, a big learning curve. So the reason I like things like MBTI or the Big Five, more than Big Five sometimes, or I like any of the other models, same reason I like arc ternary logic, is it creates a systematic way of looking at the world that is accessible to you. The problem is, though, accessibility. I think spiral dynamics is pretty accessible, and it's pretty good. Is it true? No, it's not true. Is it true? Does that mean is it causally true? No, but it's consistent and sufficiently consistent and correspondent that it's useful. So it's sort of like, do you want wisdom, philosophy, or science? Well, I want science. Some people want philosophy, and some want wisdom literature. So I think Wilber's work is in the philosophical or the borderline between philosophy and science, and it's quite good. And so in that sense, I don't. It's like, how do I evaluate it? I don't pay it any mind any more than Martin does, because it's I don't want to say it's a crayon version, but I would see it as a normie friendly way of getting you to think about human behavior. And if you look at it the way Homath, I don't know if he shows this, but he has, just like we have it from the biochemistry of the mind over to personality traits and facets, etc. Right? We have this spectrum. He's got one that takes the Wilber color spectrum across the whole series. Now, and I just, if you're a science nerd like we are, then you understand that the way the biochemistry model we're making and the behavior model, And if you understand it more intuitively, or more so than philosophically, it's more intuitively. You could then he's trying to accomplish the same thing. So I feel like this question is asking me to criticize something, and I don't really want to criticize it because I see the value in different frames. All right.
All right. Well, I guess that's that. Shall we call it a day?
I can answer that.
I didn't realize a bunch of people were saying things in the chat because my chat windows are hidden.
Well, if you can make me the host and go on to your meeting, that's fine. I'll answer questions, but I can't see the questions. Can I see questions?
You should be able to just. Oh shoot! Well, I can't make you the host of what do we call it? Of OBS, because that's running on my desktop.
All right. So we'll just leave it.
Open the video and you can answer directly in the chat. That's what I do.
Someone in the chat says, the things you're talking about is brilliant, yet your channel performs very poorly. Well, yes, the story of our channel.
It's the story of our work. I mean, you have people that get what we're doing and they're just love it, right? And you get people that either don't understand it, or don't understand it and hate it, or just can't, or just negative react to it. I mean, we fill a market position, and I don't think I think as Francis started out this meeting with, was just that if the reason we're inaccessible is because we're quite sophisticated in it. We forget how much knowledge you need to understand what we're talking
about. Not only you can't be, to understand the work, you can't be an expert in one area, because then the rest of it just sounds, gibberish to you. You kind of need to be a multidisciplinary, know enough. It can't just even be like beginning knowledge if you're trying to fields. You need to know enough to be able to hold a conversation in, economics, politics, law, geophysics, not geophysics, geopolitics, computer science, mathematics, and even language. Like, it helps to know several different languages.
So it's what we're doing is hard, right? So I expect it to be hard for people to access. On the other hand, what's annoying for us is once you understand it, it's fucking simple, right? And so it's getting people from A to B so they can see the simplicity of it. All right. I was going to say there's one question left. Oh no, you have. So how are we going to deal with the questions in the feed? What are we going to do?
It's not so much questions in the feed. I think it's just people, the audience exchanging information. I just didn't see it earlier because that window's obscured. I don't think there's really any questions in the feed, per se.
Yeah, I'm just going to do a quick on 8, if that's all right. Mm-hmm. With regards to Doolittle's young adult obsession with sci-fi, what is the founding of the Institute inspired by Hari Seldon's foundation? Reading it, Curt has many attributes similar to Hari Seldon. Yeah, I actually, somebody else made that connection. He's moved on from us now because he didn't like my response to the 2016 election. But I've been accused of this by a lot of people. In other words, accused. I mean that humorously. I think I do have a lot of attributes similar to Hari Seldon, and I didn't think of it that way. The Institute was not inspired by that. It was inspired by the fact that I should make it up just to make you sound smart and great and say, yeah, that's what make us sound smart. Yeah, that's exactly what we're thinking. No, I founded the Institute because I saw two problems. I saw the technology problem that I was trying to work with, and I saw the philosophical problem I was working with. And frankly, once you found an institute like that, you create an organization which can incorporate people and that they can help you do the work. And that's what I did, as I got people to help me do the work.
I've liked Revenge Arc as the best story. What the government did too when you were in Ukraine and they decided you were going to kill it.
Yes, yeah, but that's true, but that's also not nice. So the real answer is
It's a better story.
it's a great story. When I was in Ukraine, Obama had started this stuff with screw with banks around the world who had American assets, and then and followed by them playing IRS games with me when the IRS owed me money, but they tried to get me to that I owed them $2 million, and I'm like, you're fucking high. And I actually had a period in 2013. I said, I'm going to kill this government because if it's doing it to me, it's doing it to everybody else. And I haven't really tempered that feeling much, to be honest with you. So I just feel like we're making progress. So no, yeah, there is a relationship, a logical relationship between what we're doing and what Hari Seldon was doing. It's just not mathematical; it's operational. All right. I mean, Martin even got farther than this.
Well, I usually get 10 questions prepared, and there's no risk that we'll get through more.
Okay,
All right.
I really do have to drop.
All right, so thank you, everyone. This is Francis, Martin, and Curt for the Natural Law Institute. It's been our Q&A session for Friday, January 17th to 2025. Yay. And thank you for joining us. And if you have any questions, if you want to leave a question, Francis puts it in the link below. And thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Take care.